they came to me and they said, "This is what we want to do. Can you do it?" And I said, "Well, how much are you going to pay me?" And they put out a number, and I said, "Of course I can." I had no idea whether I could or not. But for that kind of money, when you're that young and you know what you've got your hands on, and you're going to be cemented in that and be a fixture of helping a Fortune 500 company grow, you say, absolutely, I'll figure it out. And that's what I did.
Hey guys, welcome to the Hi Podcast, the How I Got Here. I am your host, Travis Waters, and I put this podcast together to kind of tell stories that are worth sharing, whether it's someone that went from zero to hero to zero, or something in between. On today's episode, we talked to Mr. Rod Vermilio of the Global Sports Bet Network and kind of get a full scope of his life trajectory, how he started with focusing specifically in the construction and architecture space, and how a few things had him shift into sports and then now sports betting. I hope you guys enjoy this episode, so let's go ahead and toss it over to our conversation now. Enjoy. Hey guys, it's me, Travis, with the How I Got Here podcast on episode numero 6. We're on episode 6 here. We have Mr. Rod Vermilio of the Global Sports Bet Network. Now, before we go into anything on seeing the path that led you to where you are today, even though I kind of just mentioned it a little bit, tell people where you are right now in 2025, your role, your company, and what you're working on.
So I'm the founder, CEO of Global Sports Bet Network. Right now, we're a sports technology company and a syndicate trader based here in the U.S. So right now, we're currently working with influencers and content creators, creating white label subscription products for them and doing revenue share. So that's the path that we're on right now, just because of all the limitations and scalability of us, being able to get all of our action down here in the U.S. We've also had discussions with some of the larger syndicate traders overseas, like Waterhouse VC and Punt Team, and currently working on some deals to try to um, work with them on rev share for some of the software profits that the sports day trading software puts out.
All right, and one of the first questions I like kind of leading off with, besides that question that I guess I technically led off with, is as far back into your memory as you can go. How old were you, and what was the very first time that you can remember having a "this is what I want to be" or "this is what I want to do when I grow up"? So, kind of, what was the age range, and what was the first concept, if you will?
Well, in my professional past, I always wanted to be an architect. So back when I was a teenager, junior high, doing a lot of art stuff, and realized pretty quickly that, not a lot of artists make money. So took a mechanical drafting class, wanted to get into architecture, and do the construction thing. So that's really, I mean, I didn't grow up going, "Hey, I want to be a sports bettor and a sports day trader." Um, so did that, went to college, moved from the Midwest to Florida to pursue college, play college sports, and always had a fascination with sports and numbers, of course, with the architectural background. But so that's really where I got my professional start. And it just so happened that the numbers all translated to, back in 2002, I think it was, we were able to, as Americans, trade on the Forex market, the foreign currency market. And I bought some software, and, when I'm up drawing on some of the projects that we're working on, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning because the phones aren't ringing. I'm not at job meetings. And so I'm trading Forex market stuff. And, that led me to, hey, let me try to get behind the software, the algorithms that we have in the Forex market and see how those are all written. I never could get any traction in the Forex market. And so when I started looking at sports and playing college baseball and basketball and baseball and in all sports, to me it's all numbers, it's math and statistics. And so I started correlating the numbers behind baseball to the software. The reason I couldn't get the software to work in the Forex market was their variables. You don't know how long you're in a trade. You don't know what your win-loss rate is going to be, and you don't know exactly what you're going to make or lose on a trade. And in sports betting, it's a little bit different, right? Because we know that a game is roughly 3 hours. We know what we're going to win or lose on a bet or a trade that we put in. And we also know that you can be very bad and you're going to hit 30% over the long run. And you can be very good, even the best, and you're not going to hit more than 60, 62%. And so all of those combinations uh, got me from the architectural and construction side to get the software to work.
So it started off with the interest in art that then spiraled into the interest in architecture. Now, when you said you went to college to and you played college sports, was your degree you were chasing at that time, was it architecture based?
It was architecture and construction based. I mean, I wanted to go to Florida and play baseball, University of Florida. And, the realization was coming from the Midwest to Florida, those guys, it's the jump between high school and college is just so great. And then from college to the pros. But, I got to the University of Florida, visited the campus, and, knowing that if I went there, I would not play. I would sit for 3 years before I even got a chance. And so the the big um, the big draw was a community college because in Florida, there's pro scouts at almost every JUCO game, and so that's what led me to go to Florida. Um, and I wanted to study architecture at Florida. They call it architecture. When I started interning with an architect, it's 6 years to get through that program. The architect looked at me, he says, "Why do you might as well go to school to be a doctor." You're going to go through 6 years of school, and for what? And at that time, engineers could do what architects could do, but architects cannot do what engineers do. So I transitioned over from wanting to go to University of Florida into engineering, which led me to the University of Central Florida. Unfortunately, I opened my own business at 19. I got pretty busy, was pretty successful. I just couldn't concentrate on the academics, so I didn't get my engineering degree. I just went into construction and architecture at that time.
So you still kind of were on the same path in terms of what you wanted to do. You just didn't get the official, diploma or the paper degree, if you will. I don't know if I knew this or not. I don't know if this is how we originally connected, but I did not know that you had went to UCF, which of course is my alma mater. So that's new news. Go Knights.
Yeah, go Knights.
But so what was the main like what was the thought process? So you're going to school for something. What was the thought process that took you to the point where you're like, I can do this without doing any more school. I don't need more school to start getting my hands dirty or whatever. What was the thought process of not finishing that degree?
A lot of luck. So, I hooked up with a company called Discount Auto Parts. And I think when thinking back, they probably came to me after going to 9 other people, and they said, "We need to do this, this, and this." And their goal was to have 2,000 stores by the year 2000. And this is back when it was privately owned by the Fontaines before they sold in 96 to Advance Auto Parts. But they came to me and they said, "This is what we want to do. Can you do it?" And I said, "Well, how much are you going to pay me?" And they put out a number, and I said, "Of course I can." I had no idea whether I could or not, but for that kind of money, when you're that young and you know what you've got your hands on, and you're going to be cemented in that and be a fixture of helping a Fortune 500 company grow, you say, "Absolutely, I'll figure it out." And that's what I did. So that took precedence when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, making $100,000 plus a year, growing it to 400,000 or 500,000. School kind of takes a back seat to that, because I was able to bring on engineers underneath me into my company and not have to have that degree personally myself.
Now, was that a prerequisite of this company says, hey, we'll give you a six-figure salary, but we need you to not go to school because we need you full time? Or was it something where you're like, I'm making so much money, I don't need this degree anymore? Which was the straw that broke the back there?
So, they weren't paying me a salary. They were paying me a per job basis.
Okay.
And so, but it was, I knew it was 100 plus going in, and I just didn't know what the ceiling was. And then the fact that I was, already had a drafting and design company doing custom residential projects, I knew that my builders out there were making a ton more money than I was as an architectural designer. And so I knew that I could sit with a few years experience, take my test, and then do construction as well. And that's what led me to the design build, company that I grew into, multi-million dollar company.
And so, what is the so we're you get this opportunity, this six-figure salary that gets you to stop going to school roughly around 18, 19, and then now we're working on this company. You're running a company. You said multi-million dollar company. What's the time period from you leaving school, getting this opportunity, and running your own company? How long kind of was that? Was that like a few years or like much more than that?
It was within 3 years. So I opened my own business at 19. I was interning with an architect at the time. The discount auto parts came through. So I was trying to do both, right? I was trying to manage both. And it just, their path of growth, we had 200 projects either in the architectural stage, the engineering stage, or construction. And so it just got so overwhelming that I just didn't have time to do both. And so I thought, you know what, I can always go back to school if I ever need to and finish up that engineering degree. And I just never had to. After they sold in 96, so, I was in college 88, 89, and 90. I went ahead and transitioned full time into, helping the discount auto parts people, Denny's restaurants, and doing the architectural end on my own. And so within 3 years, I was already making well over six figures. So that was what, 3 years time. Um, and the first $1 million, getting to that first starting off and making $1 million, that seemed like it took forever. But then the jump from 1 million to 5 million, and then parlaying that into, I was designing and building homes, 15, $20 million homes for athletes and, um, you know, high net income earners, in the Central Florida area. So, um, and it wasn't until the crash of '09 that, I lost $27 million.
Man, is that like an all at once thing? Just like the housing
Yeah.
market crash, and then all of a sudden, that amount does that wipe out the entirety of the company, or is it like 90%?
Oh,
What is that?
absolutely. Absolutely. I owned 34 properties at the time, was living in a $2 million house over on Markham Woods Road, if you know where that area is, over by Longwood, Lake Mary.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And so I had 34 properties. I was building two 18,000 square foot specs. One of them had a indoor bowling alley. One of them had an indoor gym, off the street of Dreams that was right down the street. I had a lot of rental properties. I was building a 12 lot subdivision. And so when the market crashed, I also owned a building supply company at the time. Buying so much materials and doing a multi-million dollar company, I was like, hey, I might as well buy it for myself. And so it was the perfect storm when '09 hit. And in between, it's probably '08 when it really started, and then it just unraveled so quickly. By 2009, I was bankrupt. I lost everything, literally.
And so I'm trying to, because I know you kind of gave us some years and some ages and stuff. So from you starting your own company to the housing market crash, what's that period of time where you're growing this into this multi-million dollar company with the architecture and the construction combo?
So, you know, not to date myself, I was, born in '66, so 88, 89, I'm in college, so 23, 24. Um, so that's a 10-year period. So I was in my 30s.
So you just spent roughly a decade building this company up, housing market crashes, everything, all the projects, the company, the net worth, the capital, all gets wiped. You essentially, like you said, you went bankrupt, and this is '09. So what happens? What happens in terms of the idea? Is it, oh, I'll just start over again with the same industry, or this industry is way too volatile for me to ever touch ever again? What was the thought process after you're kind of uh, clawing out of the depths of this housing market crash?
So 92, 93, I'm starting to make a lot of money. Um, got a bookie in Florida. I hit those guys in baseball between 5 and 50,000 a week. And I just took that money and started parlaying it into some lots. Well, of course, they cut me off. Um, and so I buried that stuff in the closet of my mini mansion. And so as I'm moving out of my $2 million house, I reach in and I grab all that paperwork and I thought, wow, you know, there's no architectural work, there's no construction work, there's no building supply, need. Um, but I've got these algorithms that I was working on that I was very successful in the baseball betting world. What am I going to do? So that was the catalyst for me going out to Las Vegas. I'd never been to Las Vegas. So I thought, where can I go and legally do this, right? So I come out to Las Vegas. And this is 2010. So now the internet has all of this data that wasn't available to me in the sports betting world in the 90s and early 2000s. This is 2010. So I take the baseball and I start looking at the math behind basketball, NHL, all the NFL, all the other sports. And I started to get it to work. Now, at this time, I start writing a software on Excel. It's 30 lines, 30 investment lines, and I get it to where it's got 15, 20 years of data making 20 to 40%. Back in those days, you got to remember it was a little bit different. You could go to the window and you could put down 20, $30,000 with without a blink of the eye. Now everything is so commercialized that they limit you when you start winning big money. And so I get out here, and at that time, you're able to put $10,000 down before they'll even take your name down. And so it was really like the Wild West to me. So I realized that, hey, this is something I could get to grow, and the opportunities were so large that I just continued to explore that path.
So now we're in Vegas. We're betting heavily in the wild, wild west. You have the algorithms, and you actually have much more data than you've ever had to enhance those and not just one sport like baseball. You said that the other sports you start incorporating. 2010 roughly. How many years are we just living large, living life in Vegas, going to the sports book, dropping five figures, maybe even six-figure bets to um, to getting to a point, like how long does that last before we get to a point where we go, maybe I can monetize this beyond me profiting from it? So how long does that solo mission of, oh, I have these things that's working, I'm printing cash and I'm living in Vegas and life is great. How long was that period roughly?
Um, it ebbs and flows. So, 2012, 2013, the um, poker Black Friday hits. Um, sure, you're very familiar with that.
Yeah.
So, at this time, 2010, 2011, I'm out here with very little cash. So I'm scraping out a living just because I don't have the capital. I'm on a plane flight to Seattle. I meet a guy that had, didn't look like a sports guy. He starts asking me, "Do you live in Vegas?" And I said, "Well, I split time between here and Florida. What do you do in Vegas?" And I tell him, do a little sports betting. I'm writing a software and creating a software package for sports betting. He's all interested. A year or two goes by. I'm giving him information. I'm giving him plays. In Seattle, he can't get the money down. So he says, "Look, I'm flying in to meet with you." We meet in Las Vegas. He hands me 300,000 cash. So that's 2013. I'm managing that. And at that time, I'm like, look, we need to start, I'm going to get on the internet, do a website, start a subscription package for sports bettors. He said, look, it's too much heavy lifting. For the money that you're making, I'll raise blocks of $1 million. And what we'll do at that point is we'll manage the money. So we go 2014, we go and see a gaming attorney out in Las Vegas, and it was illegal for us to manage other people's money at that time. The Senate was voting on that, and so he had raised the first block of $1 million. He goes on the operating table in 2015, doesn't come off, so he passes away. I have to now give the capital. I don't know who the block of investors are. I have to give the 300,000 to his estate. So, I was just, you know, I was making probably low six figures at that time, so I wasn't killing it, but I was making a good living. And, this is 2015, so uh, Gators Dockside is a corporate client of mine. I've designed and built, most of those in throughout Florida. They reached out to me and said, "Hey, look, we want to do a couple in Jacksonville, one in Yulee. You want to do those?" So I kind of put the sports thing on hold, go back, I build those stores out, um, trying to create more capital, create some capital. I bring somebody out here, pay for them to live out here, rent a condo, and I'm funneling money to them just to keep the concept going, right? Um, and then 2018, 2019, uh, we do a couple of real estate deals on a handshake. I have a client that stiffs me for about 400,000, and my wife at the time said, "Look, let's go out and concentrate on the sports business." And so we start, we get those stores built, we raise some capital, we come back out here. Unfortunately, my father at that time got pancreatic cancer. He's supposed to live 6 months, kind of put my life on hold to help him through that. He fought that for 2 years, and we get out here full time, ready to rock and roll, and then the pandemic hits. No sports. So, I've signed no work up in Florida in the architecture construction world. We have no sports. So now I take the software, and back when I told you it was 30 lines making 20 to 40%, for an investor, that's great, right? And for a sports bettor, it should be great because we know nobody really makes long-term money sports betting. 2 or 3% of us do. And so the guys from Poker Stars that ran the merchant account, they offered me 3 million back in 2014 for the software. Back when I was broke, literally, and I could have used the money, but I knew with the path, they told me back then, sports betting is going to become legalized on a state by state basis. Poker is going to become legalized. And so I just kind of held out. And of course, that happened in 2018. So the pandemic hits, I take the software, now I expand it from 30 lines to 200. Now we're getting 60 to 120% returns. So now we're really talking some big numbers. And so the problem now at this point is you have influencers and people out there that are selling subscriptions saying, "I make $3 million last night or last week sports betting." When we all know that, those are maybe a 15 team parlay that, you'd be better, you have a better odds of getting struck by lightning twice in the same spot. I'm not saying those payoffs don't happen, but for 99% of the public, that's not how it works. And so now you're dealing with, to sell subscriptions, you're dealing with, sports bettors that I want to win 100% tonight. And that's just not the reality. So, you're dealing with the noise of those people out there. And so they make their money selling subscriptions. And that's why today, Global Sports Bet Network does not sell subscriptions. We work with B2B, where we want to disrupt the industry and we want to help sports bettors learn how to effectively and responsibly sports bet. And so, we do, we're the engine and power a lot of white label products for content creators and influencers to really teach people, how to do this responsibly. And, as you know, everybody's scraping the same, anybody can give information out for the plays. If and you've looked at our worksheets, we not only give you the amount to better trade that we're trading on our cash amount or capital, but also the percentage so that whether you're a $5,000 sports better or you're a $500,000 sports better, it teaches you how to get ROI, get on house money, and be able to calculate what your returns versus your risk are on a daily, weekly, and yearly basis.
So I find it pretty interesting how you've kind of always had, with even with the early baseball algos, like you said, put away in the closet. You've always kind of had this thing in your back pocket, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to focus on what I know best: architecture, construction. Boom, market collapses. Let me pull those back out again. Go to Vegas. Oh, there's opportunities again in the on the real estate side of things. Let me put that in the back pocket, and then oh no, I think actually before that you mentioned you had something that was like you're raising funding and then your business partner literally just passes away, and that's definitely a wrench in that plan. And so you keep going back and forth, returning to this, and then you finally get to a point where especially the wife backs it up, which is always an essential huge part of any business. um, you now go in full steam, but you don't. So I know you were mentioning, which I guess yes, we all agree on. There's an insane amount of people out there, quote unquote, capping and selling subscriptions to their plays, and they can be that person that hits that one in a million moonshot, and then all of a sudden that's their marketing for the next 10 years of their life. What
Right.
what part of your thought process on what you were creating and building within the sports betting space made you want to stay away from the B2C subscription, even if you gave a better product and you taught people a better way? What made you say, you know what, this this is best played as a B2B as opposed to just direct to consumer?
So, I've met with several, high net dollar people. 2002, when sports really came back, right? My wife and I took this information. I was afraid that the math behind the sports would kind of skew a little bit because there weren't people in the stands. And so I was kind of concerned about that. So we self-funded our own trading, and we were running between $2 to $3 million a year through the sports books personally. Until 2003, they started messing with us. They didn't limit us, but we would go to make a 20, $30,000 play and they would say no. And it's 15 minutes before game time, so it's not like you can run around and go ahead and get those in at another book. Um, so you know, one of the guys that we met with, multimillionaire, he's like, Rod, I want to meet with you. I want to be involved in the business. And I said, well, let's sit down. Let's go through everything. And he goes skiing for 3 months. He comes back and he calls me and he says, Rod, who do you like tonight? And I said, Jason, it doesn't work like that. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I don't like any of them. The program tells me what, to bet and trade, and that's what we do. We have 200 lines, and so we're betting 40 to 60 bets or trades a day, right? He says, well, just give me one that hasn't gone off the board yet. So I give him one. Of course, it loses. And he calls me the next day, or he texts me the next day, and he says, Rod, well, it just goes to show that I play with you the first time and I lose. And I said, Jason, you're not a good fit. And so this is the mentality. And if you go back, and you may be too young to remember these days, were the old phone rooms, the two for the monies. If you saw that movie,
Yeah.
um, you know, I actually I went into a phone room when Marty passed away in 2015. I see Money Talks on CNBC, and they're touting we have inside information, we have all this stuff. I go in as a grunt, undercover into one of the sports rooms, and I've never seen a more scrupulous. It's just a license to cheat and steal. They're playing both sides of games. I was so appalled by the business model. I went into the head guy after 2 or 3 days and I said, I don't know how you sleep at night. And he says, what do you mean? I said, you're playing both sides of games. You don't even have anything that works. And he says, well, Hotshot, do you got anything better? At that time, I whipped out my computer and showed him the software that I had. He gets me on a phone call from a guy that, and I couldn't figure out why nobody uses their real name. Well, because people would want to kill him, right? They get him down the rabbit hole so deep. And so the guy flies in from Baltimore. He says, I don't even care if your software works. It's so impressive that hand over my merchant account. I'm going to make you a millionaire. I said, look, I've been a multimillionaire. A millionaire doesn't do it for me. It doesn't move the needle. And so I figure out that all of these rooms are kind of connected. And so I start doing this on my own. I get a hold of a guy I'll never forget. And he says, how much money do you want, Rod? And I said, I don't want any. I'm going to get you on house money and I'll take a share of your revenue. He says, perfect. I get him up $700 first week. So I call the guy and he says, Rod, how do I get paid? And I said, Tom, I'm kind of confused. How were you paying? You sound like you've been doing this for a while. He says, I have. And I said, okay. And he says, I've never won. I said, not 1 week. I said, I don't want to get in your business, Tom, but how much are you down? He's a retired caterer from Louisiana. He was down $297,000. My heart just sank. And I said, if I could create a company that could disrupt the industry and align myself with people that, have a moral compass and really want to help people learn how to responsibly sports bet because it's ruining a lot of lives, I'm going to do that. And so it's taking me a long time, as you know, in this business, it's taken me a long time to align with enough people that have a moral compass. And, we want to do the subscription model for companies and provide them with white label companies for their clients where we actually put our own money on where our mouth is on every bet and trade we make and provide those tickets and that transparency that's just not out there. And so that's what's led me to want to work. I'm not going to go out on our collector car and, you know, take a brick of cash and say that I'm just not that type of person. I want to be transparent and honest. This is a grind and you can make a lot of money. And to me, it's not about the money. I could probably sell the software for 20 million right now if I really wanted to. But why not build an ecosystem of influencers with this is what then content creators, this is what they do. And they have a following and they just don't have a place that gives them, it's not like selling shirts, right? Or hats. This is something that a lot of people are looking for, a lot of people need. They just need to be taught the responsible way to do this. It's like anything else, any other long-term investment. But nobody that I've met has a software that works long-term. And so that's what I would rather help influencers and content creators. Let them focus on what they do best. Let us focus on what we do best. And then it's a win-win for everybody. And so that's why I've chosen to do it that way.
I guess I didn't ever realize how much, especially in that last response we had, how much like our ideals, if you will, the moral compasses, how much they parallel with each other. So it's definitely quite interesting. And uh, I was just like smirking at a few of the things you said. It's like, yeah, like somebody follows something that you say or do or your app says or whatever it may be, and they lose once, and they're like, well, clearly this doesn't work because I'm 0 for 1. That mentality, yeah, definitely. I definitely have heard that one before. And then also uh, I'm not calling anybody out by name, but when you said like people playing both sides, I haven't actually heard their name on social media in probably 5 or 6 years. But there's a pretty prominent social media guy who was a quote unquote a capper, and I think because we haven't heard from him in a while, word finally got out that he was, and I'm sure you probably know who I'm referring to, but his subscriptions, which were very, very expensive, he was just sending 50% of one side to 50% of his subscribers and 50% of the other side. So he's guaranteed every single night to have at least 50% of his paying users extremely happy and using those screenshots to get more users. But clearly, something didn't work out there because I have not heard from him or heard of him in quite some time. So yeah, when you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, like just over here smirking and nodding. So we have this. Okay, so we've decided to assist the people who are the ones creating the plays, who are the ones growing the social media accounts, being their own personal brand ambassadors. We're giving them the product to essentially fuel that. I believe I'm trying to remember the timeline where we're at right now, but I believe like the last thing you said is you were kind of getting everything set up because people were telling you that it's going to be state by state legalization. We get to 2018 check mark. That was actually a true fortune telling. From 2018 to 2025 was that entire 7 year period of just growing this one concept, or how has it changed along the way from now till then?
So there's only one, well, they just opened another private sports book, but all the big companies have come in and bought all the, it's all corporate owned. And so whether you're betting with Circa, Westgate, some of the big boys here, stations, they all, you don't have arbitration or arbitrage opportunities here. And if you don't have a brick and mortar casino here, you can't have an online presence. So, the 2 years that, I put my life on hold, to help my father through his uh, pancreatic cancer journey, I didn't know that was going to be 2 years. And then, we had the pandemic, which slowed things down. But, I've, last year, and one of the things that this business creates for us is a chance we can go anywhere in the world, right? And we can do this from anywhere in the world. But last year we took a trip around the United States for, a few months, and we looked at all the online sports books that are popping up on all the states. And when you look at Waterhouse VC over in London, they're betting 2 to 10 billion a year. We can't do that here in the U.S. And unfortunately, there are people like BetChris announced they were going to come in Arizona. We've been to Arizona. I was like, look, we bought real estate in Arizona. We were going to set up shop in Arizona so we could do some syndicate trading. And um, they won't cut you off for winning, but they will limit you. And so we really don't have a true um, sharp sports book. We're getting ready to go, on a big trip and go see. Tennessee's got one called Action 247. They advertise as a sharp book, but that's the problem with the industry now, that it's changed so much that we can't get big action down. And so our scalability, I mean, I can make a decent living, don't get me wrong. Now with the new tax laws, I'm sure you've heard all about those with the 90% write-offs. You know, that's going to make it even more competitive. But I've gone to Gon's place at South Point and asked them, you're a privately owned book. Would you take big action? They've told me, look, we'll take up to 20,000. Don't come in 5 minutes before the game. Let us have a chance to get some action on the other side. So we're really limited, and that's how it's changed. Um, and advertising has changed with all these influencers. We're talking to one of the biggest influencers that I know of in the world right now, a young guy. And, when you look at some of the influencers out there, 78% of them, I think, make under $35,000 a year. And everybody wants paid up front. Like this influencer wants $1 million up front. And I said, look, and their group loves what we're doing. They've seen the success over the last year, and they said, look, we want to be a part of this. So I set up a campaign for them because they said we can get 30,000 subscribers overnight. And they have over 4 million followers, and they're a really bad sports better, okay? Um, with some big names around them that play millions of dollars and lose. That's the only reason they can play that much. So I said, okay, on the first 10,000, I'm going to set up a campaign where we're going to be able to bring in $5 million overnight. That's 2.5 million a piece. Okay. So, nobody in the industry, like, me saying that we'll put our own money where our mouth is, right? Nobody else in the industry, like an influencer or a marketing group, says, hey, I know how good your product is and I know how good I am as an influencer or marketer. I'd rather make 50% of rev share than to get an upfront fee and get 15, 20%, which is, market value. And so a lot of these people they don't realize they have a shelf life. They don't realize how quickly things can change. And so I'm aligning myself up with a lot of people that go, you know what? I'm in this. I'm going to grow this business. I'm going to grow this following the right way, and want to align themselves up with a product that will actually teach that. So that's how it's changed over the last 7 or 8 years. I'm looking for a call sheet or somebody like that for a national exchange to happen to where we won't be limited. And then those guys that are subscribers will be able to really, reinvest that money and grow just like you are any other hedge fund or stock market or crypto account.
Uh, I have two more questions here before we wrap this episode up. The one is to what you were just saying. So this product, to my understanding, is B2B, specifically kind of catering to the influencers and the social media faces of the space, or voices, if you will. Now, when you're mentioning like this super popular person that you are striking up this deal with, and they have millions of followers. With it being the B2B, to my understanding, are the millions of followers or even a chunk of them going to sign up for a B2B product, even if they're not going to monetize it on they're doing their own capping subscription or whatever it may be? So, kind of, how did that, when you were speaking to this individual, kind of how did that partnership terms and what potentially can be, how did that come to fruition essentially when you have a B2B product and they have a lot of essentially B2C followers? Does that make sense?
So, yeah, like for your AI props, your props company, you guys focus on player props, right? I mean, that's your main focus. And so, love your product. I've told you I've been a fan of and watched you grow for a while now. So, like yourself, we would create a white label product, subscription product, where we would work with you. It would go under your name. It would be on your website, and we would do all the back end. So we'd create the landing page, the merchant account for the rev share. You would just come in as a company or an influencer, market that, and we upload all the information from our software every day into your portal, so that it lets you concentrate on what you're going to do, and we handle all the other aspects of that. And so, them knowing that they don't have to do anything on a day to day basis, that we handle all that on our end, eh, you know, that's what they loved about it because they didn't want to have to make the bets and the trades. And truth be told, I would rather work with smaller companies that want to grow this thing together. The working relationships are just that much more pleasurable to work with. But when you get into some of these guys that have all of these followers, um, they want it just their way. They don't have to work hard. Um, one of the guys, two UFC fighters that we've talked to that are brothers, they're like, I want this guaranteed, this guaranteed, this guaranteed. And I said, okay, what is it that you're going to guarantee me? Are you going to guarantee me one post a week, three posts a week? When we tried to just bring them in as brand ambassadors through GSPN, when we were having those discussions, and they're like, well, we usually don't guarantee anything. And I said, yeah, well, they name streets after deals like that. It's called one way. And so, I want people that, anybody can do what we do. As an architect, a contractor, it's relationships that gets things done, right? Anybody that's licensed or anybody that's got a following or builds a company can do what we do as companies. It's relationships that make it grow and make it fun, and where it's enjoyable and works for everybody. And so that's essentially why they like the product, and they get access to it on a daily basis. Unfortunately, some of those guys throw millions of dollars around. They'll never stick to the system. And so that's the sticking point that we have, and some of the things that I don't know that are going to work out with this big influencer, because I just don't think they can. I don't think they may be able to scale down and do it responsibly because they're such a loose cannon when it comes to making bets and trades right now.
Yeah, that's definitely something that is very rampant in the space of the people that have the biggest followings. They got the biggest followings because they sold the sexy parlays, and then all of a sudden you reach out with the more uh, bankroll friendly, responsible betting system like you're mentioning, and then they're just like, oh, um, so I can't do 10 pick parlays only. So yeah, definitely, definitely. I've been in those shoes before. The last question I like wrapping up our episodes with is, I kind of have an idea already what your answer is going to be, but going through the entire storyline that we just kind of covered here, if you were to attribute, I don't know, just stumbled and mumbled there. If you're going to attribute one of the butterfly effect happenings out of all of, and you've had a lot of chaotic situations that you've kind of, I mean, of course, what is it? The phoenix rise from the ashes. So you've done what you could with the lemons that you got, but what is the one butterfly effect out of your entire professional life, or could be personal life, that you accredit to where you are today, and as successful as you are today within the sports betting space? What one thing happened, and you? Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened, but what's the most important thing that you're like, this, because of this, I'm here today?
I think it's what I learned early on with, pushing the limits of what I could do. I wasn't recruited real highly out of high school to play sports. I've been kind of that underdog. And then I was able, I thought I'd be able to play college baseball, but then I was playing intramural basketball, and a coach comes up to me and says, "Hey, where'd you play high school ball at?" Well, I said in Indiana. He says, "Well, are you going to play in college?" I said, "Well, I'm here to play baseball." And he's like, "Well, why aren't you playing in college?" I said, "I don't think I can play at that level." He said, "Look, I'll give you a scholarship if you come play. Give me 2 years." And so you go through that, and then you go through the next step is in the professional world, the discount auto parts. Can We don't think you can make this happen. And then you help them grow to where they were trying to get 2,000 stores by the year 2000, and you just prove them wrong. And then so many naysayers, like my father, I'll never forget, when the crash happened, he's like, "Well, what do I tell my friends you do for a living? You're going to out west. You're a well-known, architectural and design build contractor in Central Florida." It's like, I don't really care what you tell them I do because they're not paying my bills. And so, and then making a lot of money and losing a lot of money. I think after losing a lot of money, I never had to live with setting an alarm clock. I never had 8 million people calling me saying, "You got to be here, you've got to do this." And so it's the freedom. And I think seeing that you can accomplish some of these things, I knew that there was a way to make it. And don't get me wrong, we don't win every night, we don't win every month. We've never had a losing sports season in over 60 sports seasons in a 30-year span. And so the math behind sports is not going to change. Um, and so I think getting a challenge and overcoming the challenge, and then listening to the naysayers, and I carried a lot of people when I was wealthy, and then who's riding along with you. Yeah, it took my wife a couple years. She thought I was crazy at first too, but she puts in all the data. So I got her involved a little bit more and more each day until she finally, I wanted her to be comfortable with it, right? Now she's like, I look at the sheets. I go, "Those are terrible plays today." And she goes, "Just stick to the software," because she's seen it work year after year. And so I think, it hasn't been one thing, but it's been a lot of those things. But the main fact is that if you love what you're doing and you want to help other people, um, make money and help them grow their brand, it'll automatically resonate to you. So it's the relationships along the way that I think have is what it is for me, that I know you are going to be very successful. I know that some of our other partnerships are going to be very successful, and that's who I like to align myself up with. So I think, just going through those things, making a lot of money, losing a lot of money, but having freedom, um, it's just an overwhelming fact when you don't have to go and you don't have to take on projects or partnerships with people you don't enjoy working with, or people that don't align with your moral compass. I think that's been the lifting and the aha moment of where we are now, and why we like to align ourselves up with some of the partnerships that we have, and it's going to attribute to our success.
I like it, and I definitely now essentially reflecting on what you were saying, the whole not setting an alarm clock thing is one of my favorite things, favorite things ever. Because I mean, I episode one you guys heard where I went, I was teaching kids in China how to speak English through a like face to face like this, like one on one chat service, and I mean I'm up at like 3:30 in the morning because they're in Hong Kong in Hong Kong hours, and I was like, I mean that's what I had to do to get to here today, but yes, the no alarm clock thing is a very very nice feature.
Yeah,
Um,
it's great, isn't it, to like, to be able to do what you do and know that whether it's going to be successful. It's how far do you want to push it.
yeah,
um, but you control that destiny, and it's great to know you can wake up. And if you don't, we, of course, we're really good. We wake up, get all the information uploaded in the sheets. Takes us a couple hours in the morning and a couple hours late at night to put in the data, but all the rest of the time is really ours. And so it's freedom. And when you get to that point where the freedom is worth more than the money just follows, because you enjoy who you're working with and the things that you're doing.
exactly. And I'm sure that me saying that on this episode at the end of it is going to jinx me to where for the foreseeable future, I'm sure all my partners and my relationships in Europe and Malta and everywhere over there, I'm going to start having to like now set an alarm every single day because I said that out loud. I'm sure that's what's going to happen.
Right?
But no, yeah, if you're having fun, money will come along as long as you're enjoying yourself. Rod, I definitely appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story with us. I do have his name on the screen as you guys see, spelled the same way on LinkedIn as well. If you want to send him a connect, I can't promise you he's going to accept it, but if you're interested in a story, interested in learning more about the Global Sports Betting Network, hit him up on LinkedIn. And Rod, again, thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate being on your show.
All right, see you guys on the next episode next week.